Hi, I'm Nigel from the Happy Giraffe Budget. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use our spreadsheet. We're going to look forward 2 years into the future, see your income, cover your fixed expenses, and then find a weekly allowance that works for you. So when you open the spreadsheet at first, you should be on this tab called Period. This is where we set when our budget starts, how far we are going to look forward into the future, and what the currency symbol will look like. The start date is going to set which day of the week you get your allowance. Monday is easy to start with, but you can do any day that works for you. For this example, we want to look forward 2 years. So we're going to put 104 in for the number of weeks. You can do less, but again, this is just a good place to start. For the currency, you can select from the drop-down list what symbol you want to show up in the other tabs. So if I set this to euro, you can see on the next tab that the symbol changes from a dollar sign. This doesn't change any of the calculations, it just makes the currency look more familiar now that we have people all over the world using the spreadsheet. For this video, I'm going to set the currency to dollar, the start date on Monday, April 3rd, and we're going to look forward 104 weeks. Now we can go to the next tab along the bottom here to enter our income. Now that we know how far to look forward, we need to know how much money we have to work with. First, you'll see the bank balance. This is the amount you have right now to pay your normal expenses. This is usually what you have in your checking account or in cash. You don't want to include any savings or investments here because the spreadsheet is going to use this along with your income to make sure that you have enough to pay for your day-to-day expenses and bills. After the bank balance, you'll enter in your income sources. If you get a steady salary, then this part is pretty easy. You give it a name, use the drop-down to show how often you get paid, enter your take-home amount, and the next date that you will get paid. We're not including bonuses or tax returns or anything like that. If you do get those, then that will be a nice surprise when it happens, and you can decide how to use it then. If your income isn't as steady, look over the last few months and find an average that you can enter in here. In this case, you just don't want to guess too high because the rest of your budget depends on this income. So just like we did with the bonuses, we want to be conservative about this income. It's always an easier situation to figure out what to do with more money than you expected than it is to deal with things the other way around. Now we can go to the next tab along the bottom and enter in our fixed expenses. This one is going to take a little more time on your part, but it isn't that bad because you already know most of your fixed expenses. These are your bills, any debt payments you have, insurance, monthly subscriptions. Savings should be included here too. Remember that we're not looking at groceries, entertainment, clothing, none of that. Those are all going to come later. The sections here are divided into how frequently they happen. The first one is monthly. Most of your fixed expenses will probably end up here. Give each one a name, an amount, and enter the day of the month that it happens. You'll see we added savings here. We consider that a fixed expense. It's really important to have some kind of an emergency fund because emergencies are absolutely going to happen. So even if it's just a small amount, savings should be somewhere on this tab. If you have any credit card or other debt payments, put the minimum amount due in here. Then you can add an extra line for how much you can afford to put toward paying off those debts. We have another spreadsheet to help you figure out what order to pay them off and how to track your progress toward becoming debt-free. Something like utilities is always an interesting one. You want electricity and gas and water in here as a fixed expense, but they can change a lot throughout the year. You can usually work with each one of those companies to figure out a flat monthly rate, or in our case, we combine gas and electricity into one item because when one goes up, the other usually goes down. If you do that, make sure to average it out and guess on the higher end of what can happen. With your income, you want to guess low, but with expenses, you want to guess high. That way, when your actual bill is lower than you guessed, it's a nice little bonus for you. The next section is yearly items. You won't have as many things in here, but it's helpful to remember things like yearly fees and holidays like Christmas. Again, if you have something like car registration where you don't know exactly how much it will be, guess a little high and then enjoy the extra money when the actual bill is lower than that. The next section is one-time expenses. This is nice for some advanced things that you can do, but for now, you probably don't need anything in here, so you can delete these. The last section is a new one that we've added called Other. This is the catch-all for things that didn't fit into the other areas. Put the description, the amount, and then use the drop-down to select the frequency and enter a start date. The end date is not required, but it can be helpful. If you put a date in there, then the spreadsheet will use that as the last time that expense could happen. So in the example here, I know I will pay for pest control on 10/25, and then after that, I won't pay that expense anymore. This other section is also helpful for lining up expenses with your paycheck. So if I pay some amount to charity every time that I get paid, then I can enter that amount and match the frequency and the start date to my paycheck. There's a lot that you can do with this new other section, but that's the basic idea to get you started. Now it's time to move on to the next tab, your Happy Money. The spreadsheet knows your income and all of your fixed expenses now, and the timing for all of those things. So here's where it comes together and you figure out a weekly allowance that works just for you. So remember how we ignored groceries, clothing, entertainment, and all of those other things in the last tab? This weekly allowance is what you'll use to cover all of those things. Up at the top, you'll see it say $300 per week. That's your allowance that we're going to be adjusting in just a minute. Under that, you'll see your total income for the next 2 years, minus all of your fixed expenses, and then it will divide that into the number of weeks so that you can see your maximum weekly allowance. This is what we talked about in the previous video. Now the reason that this spreadsheet exists is because in real life, you probably can't spend that full weekly allowance and have everything work out. For most of us, there's a cash flow issue. We don't always have the money available in our account when we want to spend it. So you'll notice that the actual weekly allowance right now is at $300, and these three other numbers are green. If I change this amount to match the maximum allowance from up above, $312.60, you'll see that these three numbers go red now. I'm going to have 56 days where I tried to spend money and it wasn't in my account. My bank account is going to end up over $1,000 negative at one point, and on average, I'm overspending by $7.95 every week. The chart on the next tab shows you how this looks. This chart shows you day by day what is going on with your money. You see that I could spend $312 a week and I would be fine for a little while, but by January of next year, I'm going to run into problems. You can also see that overall, my bank balance gets lower and lower over time. So let's come back over to the Happy Money tab and try out a different weekly amount. Let's put in $100. That's well under my maximum weekly allowance, so let's see what happens if we try that. You can see that these three numbers are green now, and that's good, but let's look over at the cash flow chart to see what that looks like. That's getting really high. I know most times you want to see your money going up, but here this isn't good. It means money is just sitting in our bank account, and it isn't doing anything for us. This money isn't being used for a purpose. We want to make good decisions about where our money goes. If you want to put it into savings, that's great. Then transfer it over into a savings account or an investment. In this spreadsheet, we want this graph to be more even, more straight across. That means we're using as much as we can and deciding where it goes. So let's come back over to the Happy Money tab again. This bottom green number, that's what tells us if our chart is trending up or down or staying pretty even. It's normal to have a little positive money in here, $10 or even $20, but over $200 a week is way too much. So I'm going to put this back at $300. So now you get to play with your numbers and figure out a weekly allowance that works for you. Adjust this actual weekly allowance number and see what it does. You want to make sure that in the end, these three numbers are green. You can also go back to your fixed expenses and adjust things like savings or how much you're putting toward debt. At first, you probably want to err on the side of having more weekly allowance. Most people that have a hard time at first with our budget, it's because they tried to make their weekly allowance too small. That allowance has to cover a lot, everything that's not a bill. It's probably going to look like it's a lot at first, but life is expensive. So like I said, err on the side of too much. You can always adjust it down later on, or at the end of each week, any money left over can go into savings or paying down debt or whatever you like. It'll take a few weeks to figure out what you can actually live on, and that's okay. There's another tab over here for making small adjustments to the predictions that the spreadsheet is making, but you probably won't need that at first. The last tab is your next steps. Again, this spreadsheet is very different from other budgeting ones you've probably seen. You aren't going to open this up every day and enter in your bank balances and all of your expenses. The whole point is to come up with that one weekly number, your happy money. Now that you have that number, it's the only thing you have to manage. It doesn't matter how you spend it or what other categories you used to have in your other budgets. The only thing you have to worry about is making sure you don't spend more than your weekly allowance. You can do that however you like. We like to use an app called Good Budget. It's free, it works on Android and Apple. You can sync up to 2 users. We've used it for a long time, and it makes sure that my wife and I are always up to date on how much we have left throughout the week. Our next video will cover how to set that up. Also, if you want to get into why all of this works so well and understand the Happy Giraffe Budget System better, our book goes into all of the details. It's free on Amazon if you have Kindle Unlimited, or it's $15 otherwise. If you have any questions or need help, we're happy to talk to you for free. Just email us with any questions you have, and we'll see you over in the next video.